The world is saved. The living room's dark, save for light being cast from the big TV screen and the imminent sunrise that's teasing the one starry sky with whispers of morning.
Hey, George.
Hey, Lions. How's it going?
Man, it is so freaking cold here. Like, I know we don't talk about, like, our personal lives outside video games a lot, but it has been unacceptably cold where I live and just like,
It has not been ice outside?
It has not been ice at all. It has not been ice to see you either.
Oh, man. I don't know. I think we should both chill about that, though.
Dude, just be cool. God, this is terrible. We've now devolved into, which one was this? Was this Batman and Robin?
It was Batman and Robin. Yep. It was the one with the nipples on the batsuit.
Unfortunately, I think it's only one of two with nipples on the batsuit.
It is true, but it is also one of our close friends, Frank's favorite.
I recall him going on a lengthy exposition about how it was his all-time, hands down, questions, favorite movie.
Absolutely. In fact, I know it's his favorite because it is the only Batman movie that he has a physical copy of. Now, who got him that physical copy and demanded that he keep it? That doesn't really matter. What matters is it's the only one that he owns, and therefore is the one that he loves the most.
Yeah, that stands to reason completely. So we played for this episode's game, Dragon Warrior, and
not Dragon Quest. Or was it Dragon Quest?
So this is the thing. I realized after we decided to play this game that I set myself up for a real doozy of a time trying to explain this. So Dragon Quest is a long-running series very popular in Japan. It's a Japanese role-playing game series that was later acquired by Square. So the company that makes Final Fantasy is now also the company that makes Dragon Quest. Here's the thing. This series is deeply beloved. So Dragon Warrior, released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in America, is the game I played as a kid that I wanted us to play. Except here would be the entire episode for that game. Full nostalgia goggles required, credits.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, maybe we can play this remake of it. So this game, which was a Nintendo game, was re-released only in Japan on the Super Nintendo. And they did a graphical overhaul and they fixed like a bunch of the text and they fixed some of the mechanical things, specifically like control issues, not like gameplay mechanics too much. And then for some insane reason, they decided to port that to Game Boy Color, and that did come to America. So we are playing Dragon Warrior 1 for the Game Boy Color instead of Dragon Warrior for the Nintendo Entertainment System for two reasons. One, it is very nearly the same game, so I feel okay taking in the quality of life improvements. And two, this game would not, I wouldn't want to do a review of that game without the quality of life improvements. It's super, super of its time, right? Just a lot of things they had not figured out. So this is a review of Dragon Warrior in all its multiverse fluctuations. The game originally was 1986, but the Game Boy Color remake that we played didn't come to America until 2000. But this is not a 2000 game. This is a port wholesale of a game from 1986. And here's the last wacky thing. Because they ported the Super Nintendo version to the Game Boy Color, and the Game Boy Color is more like a portable Nintendo and not like a portable Super Nintendo, the Game Boy Color port actually has more in common with the original than the Super Nintendo remake. So, do you have a nostalgia experience for that mess that I just described?
I don't, so I want to talk about this other thing. So no,
and now for something completely different.
And now this. Basically, I was playing this game, and so first of all, yes, the NES one is tragic because I was playing it for about half an hour before you said no. We're playing the Game Boy one, and I was like, oh, good, because this sucks. Like, this is bad. Yeah. You know, I mean, I already had as many notes as I sometimes have at the end of playing a game in the first half an hour, which is that's not a good thing, you know? It's
it's either a great thing or a terrible thing. There's no that kind of like explosion of notes isn't neutral.
I would actually right, and it's definitely not neutral. I'd actually argue it's more likely to be a bad thing because it's really easy to point out things that are broken on a car, but if a car is running perfectly smoothly, it's hard to point to the thing that's making that happen.
Fair.
So that, but what? Okay, so you can get a massage in this game. This is what I want to talk about instead of my nostalgia experience. You can get a massage in this game, right? Did you get the massage?
Yes.
Did you pay the gold for the massage?
I did.
What is happening there? I literally in my notes I have what in the unholy is with the powder puff massage, because it goes, hey, would you like a massage? And I was like, I guess, I'm reviewing this game, so whatever. And then it just goes like puff 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 puff, and I'm like, what is happening?
And the screen is black while this is happening. Yeah, so you just see the text.
Yeah, so you just see the text, and it goes like puff puff puff. And then the text slows down. And that was when I was like, no, it has to be the thing I'm thinking. It can't be anything else. Because it's like puff, 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 puff. And she says something, and then it says giggles. And I'm like, did I just pay for sex? I think that I did. And then I walked away. To be fair, I, the player, walked away the exact way I assumed the character also walked away from that encounter, which was... So I wanted to share that because is that a visual note? Is that a gameplay and mechanics note? Where do you put in the sex worker in our normal review structure? I wasn't sure, but since I knew I didn't have a nostalgic experience, I wanted to put it in there.
Yeah, no, that's no notes, A+ story. Yeah, because my experience of that was very similar. And it's one of those things that is obviously supposed to be funny. In the original Japanese, it's probably not a powder puff massage with the words puff, puff, puff over and over. Every time game like localizers do stuff like that, there's always part of me that just wonders, couldn't you have just taken this out entirely? Just remove that one sprite from this one room, and then there's no one in this one room for me to talk to. And then it'll be like a thing of internet lore that in the Japanese version, there's a woman you can go and sleep with. Ha ha ha. Right? Like I always wonder, like, why did you just try to G-rate it instead of just removing it entirely? Right? Like, don't pan the camera to the billowing curtains in this like Mickey Mouse cartoon. Just don't have this scene in this Mickey Mouse cartoon.
I feel like that they were in a boardroom and they're like, okay, so we can't, say thing X. What are you thinking? Are you thinking like puff? Or are you thinking like boom? Like what do you think? And then just one person says like, I'm sorry, but do we need this at all? And then they just get like thrown out of the, but
out the window. Well, and this is the thing is, to be fair, this game is not directed at small children, right? It's not that this is a game for small children. It's that the Japanese have a very different temperament for that kind of humor than Americans did at this time in history, because in America, video games were directed at small children. So, and the cultural differences besides, like what's okay for a kid versus what's not, right? So it's not like, oh, well, this is a Mickey Mouse cartoon. It's not, but the Americans were trying to pretend it was, and puff, puff, puff.
Yep. It's just like a good old, well, anyways, we'll get to that later. So,
what? God, what a like slam on the brakes, pulled the emergency brake.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
So I do want to mention my nostalgia experience for this game, because the reason I wanted to play this game is this is one of the games I associate 100% with my older brother. Like, to the point where when I fired the game up and you start in the castle, so there's the castle music, like I could imagine exactly where in his room I was sitting watching him play and reading the Nintendo Power about the original Nintendo Dragon Warrior. So like that was deep, right? Almost nothing else in the game was nestled quite that deep, but like that was just one of those things where I was like, oh, this game is on that short list along with like SimCity, where it's like, oh, this is a game I remember my brother playing. Ooh, I want to play a game that goes that far back in my gaming history, and it doesn't really come up again after that, right? It's not like when I got older, I then became a huge fan of the Dragon Quest series. I mostly associate Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior with him, and Dragon Quest actually with one of our patrons, because this game was a listener request. So like, yeah, and he's a patron, a listener and a patron. So that's a perfect segue into, you should probably support us in one way or another. Some of the ways you can do that is you can find us on Twitter and shout words at us. You can go to our website and shout words at us and ask for us to play games. You can watch me play some of these games. I played through the entirety of Dragon Warrior on Twitch, so if you don't believe me, you can go watch me defeat the Dragon Lord. If you want to go crazy and actually support us, besides being a listener, you can always rate and review or recommend us to people. Those word of mouth recommendations are everything. And if you actually want to spend money, you can become a patron. And if you become a patron, everybody gets the after show. So it's more show, but only for people who have money. But it's as little as $1.
But they have to have the money.
Yeah, but you got to have the money.
You got to have the money.
But only $1.
$1. The money.
If you have more than $1, and you choose to spend, donate it to us, patronize us with it, then you can actually get your name shouted out. That is technically the verb.
It is.
Shouted out on the show. So we want to take a moment to thank our 8-bit classics, Kevin.
All right, so here's the thing, man. Is there's not a lot, of like unique stuff. I can't do like weapons. There's 3. I can't do the shields, and I could do monsters, but I'm instead going to do a slightly different thing. So roll me in again.
Our 8-bit classics, Kevin.
A Kienzon throwing Krillin.
Jason.
A very serious TN.
Yarno.
A calculating Android 18.
And John.
A brawling Broly.
Our 16-bit heroes, Jacob.
A Napoleon complex to Vegeta. And
Michael.
Super Saiyan Son Goku.
And our full 3D supporter, David.
Yamcha. So, because he can't always be the best one. Sometimes you got to do that.
Yeah, you got to keep him on his toes.
So the reason why I do that is because I didn't know what else to do, and as we all know, is that one of the person who did the art for Dragon Quest, and by extension the artwork for the cover art to this game, is Akira Toriyama, who also did the artwork for Dragon Ball Z, which leads us nicely into visuals.
Yeah,
and you did such a great transition that I had to meet it.
Oh, the question is, now are you going to always try and transition? Will your no? I mean, I wouldn't.
This is as good as it gets. This is it. This is our last show.
Yeah. So this is the thing about these visuals. The American box art had like generic fantasy art. It's good, like it's a really good piece of artwork, but it's generic fantasy art. The Japanese box art, which I didn't see until years and years later, it's so obvious that it's Akira Toriyama's art style, right? It's just so obvious. But in the game, this is a NES game remade for the Game Boy Color. So, not a lot of super rich art in 40 by 40 pixels. But the monsters, you can absolutely see his hand in a lot of the monster designs because he does those like kind of weird dragon faces where the eyes are like sort of on top, right? They almost look like kind of cartoon alligators like in the face. Some of the werewolves look a lot like the chief of police in the Dragon Ball universe, right? Yeah. So like if you know his artwork from basically anywhere else.
It's racist, by the way. Continue.
I'm not saying they all look alike.
You're just saying because like the dog was the president and now there's another like werewolf out there killing people. You're basically saying, I'm just saying that I don't see breeds.
All right. I could fight back a little bit more, but I think I don't see breeds is the way that is supposed to end. So well played.
Thank you, sir.
Touche. you can see his hand in the monster design more than anywhere, right? Because the characters are just so character is so small and so tokenized that it's impossible to really see his hand in it. Now later in the later Dragon Quest games, it's like, oh my god, like it's just, Gohan is everywhere you look, and and every woman is Chi-Chi and every woman is Bulma, right? So it's just like, yeah, later. But in this game, all of it comes through, at least as far as I'm concerned, in the monster design, which is pretty varied and pretty good.
Oh yeah, no, the monster design's pretty solid. And yeah, I agree with you completely, because when I saw the dragon, I basically, all I could see was Gohan fighting dragons, back in the early days of Z, and I was like, this is just 1-to-1 for sure. Yeah, so the monster design is varied. It does. So I will say that they don't do this to the point where I found it like obnoxious. They do some palette swapping later on, where it's just like, oh, well, this is the Super Scorpion. The first one was gold, but this one's silver, and it's like, all right, it product of its time. I would have been surprised if they did not do that, but it's not like, they have like the blue slime and the red slime, so on and so forth, but it's not so pervasive to the point where I was like, you guys have 3 monsters. What are you doing? They do have a number of monsters. They are varied, and they are part of the discovery aesthetic that is, or the exploration, aesthetic that is part of this game, and generally part of games of this type. And I didn't feel like I came to the show to be like, hey, show me all of these cool new songs, and they're like, we got 2, and it's like, no, so I don't feel that the palette swapping was excessive.
It's not excessive, and there's enough variety that the monsters also have a gradient, and the palette swapping has a gradient, and they don't completely overlap, right? So like, you start seeing there's let's say A, B, C, D monsters, and right outside the castle you see A and B monsters, and then in the next area you see like B prime and C monsters, and then in the next area you see like C prime and D monsters, right? So like it makes it feel like, oh, these monsters can't coexist with those monsters because like those ones are too powerful for these other weaker monsters to feel comfortable over there. So because there's this kind of like smear of designs and colors that sort of like gradually goes up and down as you move to the different parts of the continent, it doesn't feel literally just like, oh, there are slimes, and there's red slimes and blue slimes and green slimes and metal slimes and gold slimes, right? Like there's enough variety to almost mask it, right? Like I don't think a 8-year-old me would have been like, why are there so few monsters?
What's going on here? So my notes on this game kind of have 2 overarching themes, so I'll kind of like slot them in when they hit. So one is to talk about the conveyance of the game, and the other one is to talk about the discovery aesthetic, like the exploration, right? The how it entices explorers. So one of the things that I really struggled with, where do I go? What do I do? Right. And I think that this is the game that he references, the Ego Raptor references in the scene where he talks about that, right? I think
he is, the screenshot that is on screen when he says that, I think is actually Dragon Warrior 2. It's from the original 3. It's either right. 1, 2, or 3, but I'm pretty sure it's not 1.
Gotcha. So anyway, I kind of did have, to a degree, the seed in my head planted of like, this game might have bad conveyance. So the thing that I think that I struggled with the visual, right, is because at first I was like, well, they don't tell me where to go. They don't tell me what to do. Like, how in the world could I ever find my way in this thing? And I said, well, you know what? Another really, really famous game where they didn't do that? Zelda. And I didn't seem to have as much of an issue with that. So then that's why I'm going to draw a lot of comparisons between Zelda and this game, is because Zelda also plops you down in the middle of the world and kind of doesn't... I mean, it gives you even less direction than this one. This one actually says, like, there's a dragon, you got to go kill it, go to the east, So that's actually like a point in its favor for conveyance. So the world is huge, right? But there's not a lot in it in terms of, like interesting things, right? So there's a lot of trees, a lot of hills, a lot of mountains, and a lot of lava for an average, world.
It is poisoned land.
It is so poisonous that it seeps through your metal boots.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think it's supposed to be like corrupted, right? Like it's corrupted land that's just like being there. There's like a miasma. I don't know, bad kind of stuff.
Yeah,
because when you beat the game, all the poisoned land tiles turn into flower tiles.
Aw, that's so cute. And no, I like that. So the world is huge, and it doesn't have a lot of stuff in it, as opposed to Zelda, where what Zelda did is each area was its own little vignette, right? So you would move up into an area, and then like you had stuff to do in that area, right? But then it made it very easy to say like, okay, even if you wanted to draw out a map yourself, you're like, okay, this is the area that looks like a T. This is the area that has a lake around it. This is the area with this holy crap horse guy. What's his deal? This game doesn't do that, so you can spend a lot of time kind of just wandering, and I did, and the ways in which to find where to go next, like literally, I probably scoured the coastlines for a solid hour in the first area before I just happened to find the bridge that bridged me to the next landmass. I'm like, oh, that's where that was. And this is definitely mechanics, but the thing that exacerbates that is the random encounter mechanic, because if you're trying to think like, okay, have I been here or have I not, having the Harrison Bergeron, loud noise go off in your ear every 15 seconds to completely interrupt your thought pattern of where am I going exacerbates that issue. So the world being filled with nothing basically is it, and so then that, and the last thing, and also I'm monologuing for a second, the fact then that the Game Boy screen is so small, that even further exacerbates that issue, because you're like, basically there is trees as far as I can see, and if I walk in any direction for 3 minutes there is still trees as far as I can see. What do I do? So
yeah, so that's to try and, because I think you're right that mechanically there are a lot of things that exacerbate this, but to keep it just in the visuals, some of the things working in its favor are they literally straight up tell you monsters on the other side of bridges are harder. So if I'm supposed to be doing something in this area, crossing a bridge takes me to a new area, right? So that is a crystal clear like delineation, because most of the areas have one bridge that goes between like area A and area B. I think maybe one area has two bridges between it. And it's specifically to throw you off because it leads to a dead end. So there's the visual clarity of, okay, I'm supposed to be looking in this giant expanse of nothingness. At least I can rule out that giant expanse of nothingness. But I actually think that this world is small in its like population, right? It is very sparsely populated. The viewport is what makes it feel huge, right? The viewport being right on top of you. I mean, the Game Boy version of this, the whole viewport is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 tiles wide. And you're one of them, right? So it's centered on you. So you can see a short distance in each direction, which means if you don't know where you are going, and you don't have a map handy, it is really easy to feel like, oh my God, I'm just wandering in endless nothingness, because the town you're going to might be one tile off the screen. But if you're going straight north and it's one tile further to the east or west of you, then it's like, oh my God, where is it? And it's like, it was never far. You just couldn't see it. And the reason I'm confident that the viewport on this is a like force multiplier for making the world feel bigger than it actually is, which maybe was intentional, but it's I played this game with a map after I got frustrated because there's a map in the manual, and I was like, oh hell no. If they provide you with a map, then I'm allowed to use a map, because the game doesn't have a map, but they provide you with a paper map. So I was like, I don't feel bad using this map. I'm not going to just aimlessly wander. And then once you know where you're going, now the world feels shockingly small because your viewport is the entire world, right? So now you have to deal with the random encounter mechanic and stuff, and we can talk about that, but like there's this very weird sense of, I think they wanted the world to feel large and expansive, and they didn't want to make it mechanically large and expansive because then you got to have more towns and more dungeons and more stuff. And so the way they did that is basically with a visual cheat of zooming the camera way in. So everything feels like every forest feels massive because even if it's only 8 tiles wide, that takes up the whole damn screen, right? So it's like everything now just every mountain range feels like it goes on forever. Every river that divides 2 areas feels like it goes on forever. But once you can see the whole map, you're like, oh, this place ain't that big. Like I could walk across this in 5 minutes, including random encounters. Like no big deal. But the tight viewport, it's like, it's like the opposite of claustrophobic. It's the viewport is claustrophobic, which makes the world feel endlessly massive.
And everything you just said, agreed. And then everything you just said is even worse in caves. Because in caves, they then truncate that down by another 2 pixels to the
and tons of intentional dead ends.
Yeah, and so I'm sitting here, I'm like, oh my God, did I go down here before? And again, if you're trying to map it out in your mind's eye, it's kind of a fool's errand because every 10 to 15 seconds it's like random encounter, and you're like okay, all right, so basically to me that kind of dampens a lot of the joy of exploration if you kind of feel that you're spinning your wheels, and to your point, right, is there is no in-game map to assist you, to even kind of help you get your bearings at all. Even Pokemon had an in-game map. It sucked, but it existed, so you could have...
That map did really suck.
It was bad, right? But it gave you some type of an idea of like, okay, like I'm in Cerulean City, and that's like 3 cities over from this other city. So it gave you just some type of a basis. So that's the conveyance. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention, and this is something I've been just, the meme of the guy like at the bar, hands down, like drinks everywhere, struggling with, which is that I have seemed to have in my curmudgeon-y old man George age, lost a lot of my tolerance for turn-based RPGs. I was like, oh, well, they do this and that and all this. We can get into the mechanics, but I was railing against it. But again, is trying my best to be a good scientist. I was like, but I enjoyed Pokemon, and that's a turn-based RPG. So, but the nice thing is then like with Zelda and the visuals, I'm like, okay, now I've got a side by side. Why, right? And so I will say that discovery is a core aesthetic of both of them, right? Of exploration, discovery, right? So I think that one of the main things that's different is in the visuals, in the sense that, like, when you're walking around as a guy, what's the main thing you're discovering? You're discovering new monsters, right? So there are a fair number of monsters. There's like 4 different monsters in each area, right? There's not 150, And that's the thing, is that in Pokemon you did run into the same millions of Pidgeys, like Growlins, the Crow, whatever, the movie, the Crows, right? It was like the Crows, right? But Pidgeys
everywhere.
Pidgeys, and then sometimes they were Pidgeotos, but then sometimes they were the very creatively named Pidgeots. So I say all that though to say that there's 2 main differences, which is that one is you'd be like, okay, Pidgey, what's this new thing? Oh my goodness, it looks crazy, right? And they could intersperse that at random times because it wasn't the creature itself that was of a certain level. It was it was a different type, right? A different breed. But also, 2, one of the big differences is when you're going around and you see a new monster, this like cool new looking monster, what you can't do? Get that monster. And I think that is a core difference between like Pokemon turn-based RPGs and other ones that makes it more exploratory, because when you see a new monster, you're like, okay, I'm now going to beat that monster to death, right?
It's a visual that cues a behavior change. Whereas in this, there is never a behavior change.
Right. It's just like, exactly, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, what does that one do? It could do this, it could do that. But this one is just kind of like, okay, so even though the monsters are varied visually, a lot of the times, and this is technically a mechanics note, like beating them to death, that portion of it doesn't change. It doesn't change visually, it doesn't change mechanically. So I say all that to say that the visuals of the monsters are very varied. However, the mechanically they become very samey, you know. And I guess that technically should have been a mechanics note, but
no,
I
have a whole thing about the combat that's absolute baller follower on to this. So
okay,
we will circle back to this. Don't worry.
Okay, but all that being said is that it is very the UI, the HUD, all that is straight up Pokemon. Like it just you know. They figured out a way to do that, and they're just going to keep doing it, and that's okay.
Yeah, and this is where we do the game a little bit of a disservice by playing it on a Super Game Boy, which is the HUD is optimized, 1,000% optimized for a Game Boy screen. It's black text on a white background with black outline around the box, super, super clear, and they fit as much text as large as they can, which often leads to things being weirdly truncated or cut off, right? Because they're just trying to like communicate information on this tiny little screen in text, and that's hard. But when you play it on a Super Game Boy, it's easy to forget that it's supposed to be seen on like a 3-inch, you know, poorly dim. Well, the Game Boy Color was backlit, but it's still a tiny little screen, right? So you just like, you're looking at it on, you know, your television that's connected to your Super Nintendo with Super Game Boy plugged in, and you're like, why? Like, why is the menu so boring? Why is everything so boring? and the reason that this stands out even more in the Game Boy Color version of this game is in the original NES game, they actually did, they're kind of like little vignettes where when you get into a random encounter, the entire map actually stays there and the battle screen just pops up in the center. And since you are always in the center, now there's this little painting of the area you're in, and it's got the monster in the center, and it's that now the menus are up and they cover the map instead of covering this like weird little painting in the middle of the screen. It's kind of a visually neat way to do it. Couldn't do that on the Game Boy. Nowhere close to the screen real estate to do that. So instead, you actually go into an entire battle, and now you have a like cinema style, like almost 16:9 bar across the middle, monster in the center, and the background does appropriately update. So if you're on fields, you get a fields background. If you're in the forest, you get a forest background. If you happen to get into a battle on the poison land, you get the poison land background. So there are like nice visuals in combat, but it just has these giant white bars that take up like 2/3 of the screen, right? It's like health and stuff at the top, and then like the menu, the action menu at the bottom. And it's not, I get it. Like, again, it's a Game Boy size screen, but it just, so much of the screen is dedicated to empty boxes that we may eventually have to put text into. And that kind of is boring on a gigantic screen.
Yeah, that it is. I will say, one thing for sure in its favor is the colors are awesome. Like, they are just very, very vibrant.
The Game Boy Color games, man, some of them really like A+ palettes, like just charming little palettes.
Yeah, no. So I mean, like it wasn't, you know, because it would have been very easy for them to go in kind of like a dull, drowned out color scheme, because, you know, it's supposed to be Dragon Warrior.
Because the original game has kind of a dull, drowned out color scheme.
It does, but no, it's bright, vibrant colors. You know, I think that when they suddenly said a Game Boy Color, they're like, dude, we can't. I mean, it's a Game Boy Color. We have to make good on that, you know. So put some colors in there. Just saturate the hell out of it, you know. So I did really appreciate that. I'm interested in your thoughts on this. In my opinion, you walk bananas slow. It just feels sluggish, you know, when you're kind of walking around. Now, I don't know whether that was because I felt I was walking through nothing most of the time.
I think that feeling is exacerbated by not knowing your heading. If you know, okay, I walk, 20 tiles left and then 20 tiles up, and then I'll be at the next town, then if it actually feels fine. But when you are exploring, then it feels quite sluggish.
Yeah. So, and like I said, like it wouldn't have taken, doubling the speed, because then it would have been like you were moving on cocaine. But again, it just felt like maybe 20% faster, and then consequently reduce the enemy encounter rate by 20%, so that way, which would have the consequence of being able to cover more ground and getting into fewer encounters, which would have been cool. But we'll wait on that one.
So, I just want to say this now because I don't have this in my notes and I'm afraid I might forget it. There is an item that is just like a Pokemon. I think it's literally even called Repel. And
It
then,
is, yep.
And then you learn
It's
a spell, yeah, that also
Yeah.
lets you just cast that same effect. And there was, before I started using a map, I was trying to get from point A to point B, but I didn't know exactly where point B was. And because that's super tight viewport, I was just wandering aimlessly through this giant forested area, and it was really obnoxious. And I was like, oh, I'll use a repel thing. And so I did. And then I took one step and got into an encounter. And I was like, right? Because I'm sure it's something like the monsters have levels secretly, and your level has to be their level or greater. Otherwise, you will still get into random encounters. Like, I'm sure there's an explanation. It's also possible that the feature just straight up doesn't work because some old games are like that. But that's a weird thing where, like, I was still suffering from the super tight camera, and I was like, oh, this will make exploring less of a chore, and then have it so immediately faceplant and fail. I was just like, okay, well, all right, so I guess I got to deal with this, which I know, like, we're not like even knocking on mechanics' door. Like, we've just come in and have sat down and are waiting for them to get home from work. But it's really hard to talk about how it's hard to express how visually frustrating it is to be walking and then just get thrown into an encounter and then be like, crap, was I going north or northeast? Was I going straight east or east south? Right? Like, you're like, don't make me walk extra tiles trying to find this town, because then I'll get into another encounter and it will happen again. Right. So the smash cut into random encounters becomes less about, haha, I'm defeating monsters, or, oh, I haven't seen this monster before, or whatever. And more about like, crap, I lost my sense of direction.
Yep. Well, and also too, when you say like going, it behooves you, and I put thought into this, and this is still kind of a visual note, is, it behooves you to go north, south, east, or west, not at like northeast, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you actually cover more tiles if you do that, right? If you zigzag, right, you're actually covering like like half double as many tiles, right? And I thought about that. I had time to think about it because I was wandering around nothingness and trying to think about the most effective way to do it. So I would like walk the entire length and then go down 10 spaces, because that was, and then eventually I'd be like, oh, okay, well, I ran into cliffs this time. So it was, and then this is, I have two other minor notes for visuals, but to me, the main thing is I was like, this is digital vacuuming, that's
where you have to do it's like lawn mowing, the neat rows. Yeah,
exactly. Same concept, right? Where I was like, I have to, because again, if you to your point, right, is if you're off by a pixel, by a square, then you can just straight up completely miss the village, right? Because each of the villages tend to be one or two tiles, so it's like, I can't risk that, because that's kind of what happened to me the first time. Was I was just wandering, kind of, seeing where the game was visually guiding and funneling me. And the answer is it's not. It's just, there's stuff just kind of laid out, so that. The other two just throwaway things is that I thought were good was one is when you first get a weapon and first get a shield, you get a weapon and shield like as your tile. That was neat.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, you do actually change.
Yep. And then, because I remember that kind of stuff was mind-blowing back in the day, right? Because,
my dude changed.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Because I remember the first time I was playing a video game and I equipped, because I was used to playing RPGs where you equip the Buster Sword as opposed to the normal sword, and all it did was you did more damage. But the first time I played a game where the sword looked different, I was like, oh my God. And speaking of, there are different animations for different weapons. So, when you bonk things with the club, it looks different than when you slice them with the axe. And that was kind of cool. I like that.
Late in the game, you get the flame sword, which makes a cool little flame animation. When you get your ancestral sword, it makes a unique little like blue slashing animation. So they really took an incredibly limited set of art assets and said like, well, we'll at least make these interesting, which is not nothing, right? Because it shows they cared about making it visually interesting, and they just had underpowered hardware, right? Because, I mean, again, it's a port of a 1986 game, and the port is very, very faithful to the original game. And they just they didn't know any damn better. Like 1986, consoles were still not a sure thing in 1986.
That's all I got for visuals.
I got just one other thing, which I will not go super deep on this because it will easily stray into mechanics, but the layouts of the towns make the layout of the overworld map look just expertly thought out, because the layouts of the towns aren't just confusing visually, they are intentionally confusing visually. There are times when you need to walk around the outside of a town and skirt the one tile. There's 3 tiles, right? There's the tile your character's on. The tile to the left would take you into the town, and the tile to the right would take you out of the town. But you can go up or down and walk along the grass. And the visual cues that is a thing you need to do, that your brain needs to think of the very border edges of going in and out of the overworld map that way, exist. They did actually put things that if you look at them, there is no conceivable way you could get from here to there without walking around the outside of the town, but staying inside of the town and not going out to the overworld map. They're subtle. They are fairly subtle, right? Oh, there's one guy over there. I wonder how I get to him. And then you just frustratingly do trial and error going in and out of the town map because there is no visual to indicate where the town stops and where you will, enter or exit the overworld map. So it's just a little bit more visual affordance there would have been super-duper welcome.
Stuff like that's that gamey really kind of takes you out of it. I remember when I was playing Skyrim one time, and I was in a town or something like that, and I was looking at this person's wares, and instead of hitting whatever button I was trying to, I accidentally hit take. And so I took a sweet roll, right? Which registered as stealing. And then in that game, if you can kill all of the witnesses, right, then you get away with it. So, but then the problem was that people saw me now committing murder, which I had to then clean up. So basically, I think it was 22 dead bodies later. And because of the sweet roll crime, I had resolved the issue.
Wait, I can explain.
People just keep coming at me, just murdering them, just covered in blood. Please, can you just listen? I say all that to say that's hilarious, but definitely very video gamey. So to me, it's just kind of like your character's walking, and all of a sudden somebody says, "You're outside of the town now," and you're like, "Oh, okay, sorry, I'll just take another step in. All right, I'm gonna keep walking. You're outside of the town now. Okay, dude, can you just tell me where the boundaries of the town are? No, figure it out." And that's just very gamey.
Yeah,
but.
Yeah, and that is essentially exactly what's happening, to the point where I would say they thought about it. They thought oh, we'll lay out the towns in such a way that you have to get here in this non-obvious way, and we will communicate visually it's super impossible to get here without coming in from the north, which you can't do, right? It's not like you could choose where you enter the town from. So they do try to nudge you along, but man, it's I don't know how quickly I would have gotten it if I didn't already know that. And even already knowing that, there were still times I screwed it up.
Well, and also, too, keep in mind that back in 1986, people were still what is fun? Is this fun? Is this what you want? Very much so. There were times when people were oh, I know. Let's make this one, to your point, right? The situation you're describing, but people will feel super smart for being able to slowly plot it out and figure it out. It's that's not fun. That's not, no. And history has clearly borne out that type of stuff isn't fun, because now it's a cardinal sin of game design to do that type of stuff. But at the time, people might have been no, this'll make the game a little longer, and people will feel smart for figuring it out. It's no, that's not how they're going to feel.
Nah.
They're going to feel something. It's not going to be that, though.
Narrator, it wasn't.
Audio?
Yeah, I mean, I said at the top, the music in this is particularly the opening music was super nostalgic for me. The music overall in the game is fine. It's not, there aren't really any bangers in here, and it's never bad. All the music is good to very good. The problem becomes in how you interact with that music, right? the battle music is a good little piece of music. You hear it a lot, right? The menu sound is a perfectly pleasant little sound that probably was fine coming out of the Game Boy Color speakers, but you hear it a lot, and coming out of a television speakers, it's kind of grating. So like in isolation, each thing is, good to very good, but then you just get for the thoughtfulness they put into not allowing the visuals to feel too samey by those like kind of overlapping gradients I talked about. They don't do that in the audio at all. Not at all. Like there's like a song for Underground. Not only is there a song for Underground, but there's a different piece of music for the level of depth you go, which I know because the only times you ever go underground, there's only 3 levels of depth until the final dungeon, which has 6 levels of depth. So you get extra little like special, things are really serious now music, but only there. So they clearly thought about like different areas, different music, but all the first floor undergrounds have the same music. I think all the towns have the same town music. All the second floor undergrounds have the same music. All the battles have the same music. There is 2 boss fights in this entire game, and one of them is optional. So there's not a lot of boss music, right? Like there's just very, very, very little music in this game.
Yes. There's not a whole lot of music. And honestly, you know me, on a good day, my music notes are sparse, and this game doesn't have a lot of it. And so as far as music for the sake of music, the one thing I will say is I don't know on what level it is, because I was but one of the levels of the dungeon, it straight up sounds like Zelda music, Zelda dungeon music. It's like the do 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 do.
Yeah.
I remember I was looking for a very specific thing because I was stuck in an area, and I was like, okay, you know what? I've got a day before we record this. I'm looking up a video, and so I started like tooling around to try to find where I was, and then. So I don't think it was in a dungeon that I'd gotten to yet, because I would have made the note before then, but I just heard like the music, and I said, wait, I've got the right video, right? This isn't OG Legend of Zelda. So, but that's, I mean, as far as sound in surface of gameplay, I mean, it's a turn-based RPG. There's not too many things that you need to be made like aware of very, very quickly. You've literally got an infinite amount of time to process the information if you want to, So the sound effects for hitting things are serviceable. Things hitting you are serviceable.
Critical hits do make a different noise than regular hits, which again shows that like, oh, so you did think about this.
Yes. I did not notice that, though, mostly because and this would be a great segue into mechanics, because normally I was hammering through the combat so fast that I didn't even know if I had scored a critical hit most of the time, because I was like, well, we can get into that. It was basically like, okay, I'm going to hit you. It was punch for a punch, where it's like, I'm going to hit you, you're going to hit me, and whoever's still standing at the end of this, hopefully me will then go on to do greater things. Sometimes it was the bad guy, and then, I'd see in the next town that they were wearing glasses to show that time had passed,
It's later now. I do have one specific thing I want to mention in the audio, because I think like I always feel bad sending the audio upriver like this and just being like, yeah, I don't know, there were noises, but like it's kind of how unfortunately a lot of Game Boy games are, and because this was a port of a NES game, they didn't add it, like they didn't cheat and say, oh, okay, well now every dungeon has unique dungeon music. Now every island or every other side of the river has unique other side of the river music. Like they didn't do that, right? They did really faithful port, which sometimes you're probably grinding your teeth as the designers being like, but we could add something here and make it richer. And they're like, nah. But because we talked so much about the super tight viewport and the map, I think it's a really interesting follow-on into audio, because you would think like, how could that possibly follow on into audio? The reason that possibly follow on into audio is because when you collide with something that you cannot walk through, it makes a burp noise. And because I started using a map, I would look away from the screen at the map and then walk into something and burn. And so I probably heard that noise, I don't know, 50 times more than a person just normally playing the game would, because I would look down at the map and then collide with some mountains, look down at the map and then collide with some water, look down at the map and then collide with the wall. Like I just was constantly running into stuff. And every time the game had to go, hey, you hit something. Hey, you hit something. And if you hold the direction, it will continue to produce that noise. So like this is the dark price you pay for using a map. Is like, I think using a map is worth it because it solved a bunch of other mechanical problems for me, and it undid this weird visual thing that I think is probably intentional, but you do pay a price, and you pay a price by, unless you're going to let go of the D-pad every time you look away to check the map, you're going to run into stuff and you're going to hear that noise a lot.
And that's fair. Controls mechanics?
Yeah, dude, I wish I had more to say about the audio, but I just don't. So, yes, controls and mechanics.
All right, let's do this thing. Okay. This I kind of mentioned before how, like this differs from Pokemon because, you can't catch the monsters, right? So it lowers that discovery threshold. So one of the things that I ran into was that I was really excited to go out, explore this world, but the difference between exploring this world in Legend of Zelda and exploring this world in this one is that it was not based off of my skill, it was based off of my avatar's strength, right? So basically, and I find finding equivalents like fun. So I literally said, in my notes was that the minute that I left town, there was kind of a timer, right, of how many paces I could take before I died and was booted back to in front of the king, because that was the easiest way to do this, right? So I'd walk around and explore a little bit, and I'd get into random encounters. Now, exactly how far I could get varied a little bit, because it varied a little bit by how many encounters I entered and exactly how much damage I did and exactly how much damage they did to me. But especially in the beginning, those variables are pretty static, So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get 50 paces out and I'm going to die, and I'm going to do that until I level up, at which point I can get 70 paces out, and then I'm going to die until I can level up. And that was just my radius slowly increased as I gained levels, but it had nothing to do with how skillful or adroit I was playing. It was just whether or not my numbers were higher than the other person's numbers.
Has enough time passed in the form of random encounters that you are now allowed to go to the next concentric ring distance.
Right. Yeah, and that was the thing that in Legend of Zelda was different, is because, if you didn't have the best equipment in Legend of Zelda, chances were you were going to get your lunch at. But maybe not. I mean, like, you could feasibly go to Ganon just right off of the top, and if you, never, or just each dungeon, like, the last dungeon, right?
Yeah, dude, people do 3 heart runs of Zelda games where they're like, I just won't pick up any heart containers.
Yeah, it's doable. It's hard, but it's doable. So I feel that was something that really kind of grated on me. And so basically what I kind of wrote down was, it's like the overall note, which it's the longest page turn ever, right? Where it's like, as Eagle Raptor says, like, imagine if you had to walk across your room back and forth the whole time to turn the page into the book, right? Because I was excited to explore this world. I was excited to, go and slay the dragon. I was excited to do all of this stuff, but I couldn't because I wasn't high enough level yet. So I had to go out there and grind, and I didn't want to do that. So,
well, and they get you in 2 ways, right? Because you have 2 avatar currencies. One of your avatar currencies is experience, and that buys you levels. And then one of your avatar currencies is currency, which buys you equipment. And this game, for as small scale as a lot of the things in this game are, the world really isn't that big once you know where you're going. It's very sparsely populated, right? Like, there's a lot of things at a very small scale. One of the things that is most disorienting in how small the scale is in the lack of stuff. The difference between like the club and the first sword, or the sword and the second sword, and I think there's 4 or 5 swords total, so there's like 7 total weapons in the entire game, is massive. Like, it's as massive as gaining a level. Sometimes it's substantially more massive. So saying like, oh, I'm gonna grind to gain a couple levels is also, oh, I'm going to grind to get enough money to buy the next shield. Because I think there's literally only 3 shields. There's like 3 or 4 armors, 3 or 4 shields, and then I think like 5 or 6 or 7 weapons. In the whole game, that's everything. There's no anything else. So not only do you have to spend that experience currency to gain your levels, you also have to spend currency to get equipment, because the difference between success and failure may be 1 level or the 1 shield upgrade or the 1 sword upgrade. So you have to kind of juggle these things. And on the one hand, I kind of like RPGs that aren't afraid of small numbers, where it's like, yeah, the difference between a 5, attack sword and a 7 attack sword is huge, and get the 7 attack sword, right? Because it's a little frustrating when it's like, oh, there's a million weapons, and it's like, yeah, but who cares? Like, none of it,
right?
They just look different. Nothing matters, right? This is all meaningless. So it's a
we're all gonna die.
I know it's a fine line to walk, but mechanically, they decided at some point in this game, we want you to consume basically 100% of the game in these different areas. And one of those areas is the stuff. Like, can you beat the game without getting the best sword and the best armor? Yes, because they're hidden. You have to go out of your way to get the best sword and the best armor. But like, will you? Probably not, because half of the NPCs you talk to, because the world is very sparsely populated, talk about your ancestor. In this version, his name is Loto. I think in the original it was like Eric. Anyway, but like, everybody talks about your ancestor, and everybody tells you to find his sword and find his armor, right? Like, you are constantly being told, like, go get his stuff. So you're probably not going to go fight the last boss until you have found the stuff, because everybody's been telling you to do that.
I also think that for me, like the question is, why these types of games, right? And a lot of times it's oh, well, I walked around and I became more powerful, and it's like, yeah, I remember back in the day, I love that type of stuff, right? To see the numbers go higher. I don't care about seeing the numbers go higher anymore. It's just not a fun time, right? I think that what broke me with that was playing Dungeons and Dragons, and at one point just being like, oh, I can just make a 20th level character. I can make a 40th level character. Make whatever. Oh, maybe this isn't about the numbers going higher, because that's the thing, is that like as your numbers go higher, you face things that are more powerful. So there's that. This is a kind of a minor note, but it frustrates me. Heal should never be your first spell, right? It's dumb, and here's why: is because if heal is your only spell, don't give me the spell, give me more hit points, because the spell's meaningless, like, now, because there's no choice, right? So I'm like, okay, I've now got mana, which I'm going to pump into my veins as hit points, right? Now, if they give you a different spell like magic missile first, right? Then it's like, okay, well, do you want to do more damage, or do you want to survive longer, right? It's like, okay, now I've got a choice. But when they gave me heal first, I was like, just give me more hit points. Don't do this to me. And the other thing that I'm just going to keep rambling about is there's no fast travel in this game.
There's no mode of transportation at all. You see the whole world because you have to go everywhere to do everything, and you see it all on foot.
Yep. Even Pokemon gave you a bike, right? Eventually.
Yeah, the Dragon Warrior never even gets to ride a goddamn dragon.
Yeah, right? I mean, he just kills dragons. It's terrible. This is apropos of nothing. Actually, so you know what? Remind me in the after show to tell you I watched Shang-Chi recently.
Oh,
and yeah, it's good. And I had a thing about like the final fight that I wanted to just share with you. So yeah, so yeah, you see it all on foot. That means that dying is a super chore, because if you kind of were off exploring in the maxima of your radius, right? Well, do all of that again, and it's less meaningful now, because now before you needed 50 hit points to level up, and now you need 300, and the things that you're going to be walking through give you 2 hit points, right? Or 2 experience points. So it's waste of time. It's exhausting.
Yeah. So this is one of the things that I had a revelation about this when I beat the game, because I straight up failed on my first attempt. And I thought I was going to fail on my second attempt, but I actually managed to beat the final boss. And it solidified something that we have been kind of like beating around the bush about, which is the combat in this game is essentially devoid of strategy because
Yes.
it's always 1v1, right? So they literally changed this starting in Dragon Warrior 2, right? So for every subsequent game, there is more monsters and more party members, and so you have support party members and DPS party members, right? And tank party members, and you like have to think like what you're going to do. This isn't that. This is Link against the Mogoblins or whatever the hell they're called. Moblins? Is it Moblins?
Moblins. Yeah.
Right? This is Link against the Moblins, except you're choosing actions from a menu, right? When Link fights the Moblins, you have to duck and weave and dodge and hold up your shield and then, fire your sword beam across the screen and don't get hit because then you can't fire the sword beam. And now you've been depowered by making a mistake, which is always an interesting design choice. But like this game is just trading blow for blow, and then you use a potion or you cast heal and then later heal more.
I did like that.
Right?
Yeah.
So in the original
That's
NES
what
game,
it says on the tin, man.
yeah, in the original NES game, the damage spell is called Hurt and then Hurt More, which I was so sad that they fixed that translation in this version because Hurt and Hurt More, why not? But I think they honestly thought about this, and kind of to your point, it just turned out this wasn't a good idea. So it's not that it was thoughtless. It's like, oh, this actually isn't that fun of a way to do this, which is if you are going to fight the final boss can be seen from the starting castle, right? Which is super cool that it's like, oh crap, he's right there. But you have to walk all the way around the outside of the world and then go through all like 7 or 8 levels of the final dungeon to get to the final boss. When you die, you keep all of the experience and gold you had when you died, which means technically, you never have to grind in this game. You just explore until you die. And then you just explore until you die. And then once you've seen everything and you're making your final assault on the castle, you can literally just go make your final assault on the castle and just keep doing that until you have leveled up enough. And that's not very fun, but I do think, especially considering, when in history they were designing this game in the early 1980s, I do think it's really interesting that someone probably thought grinding is not fun, but trying to be successful and learning what worked, what didn't, that is fun. The problem is there is no strategy. It's not like on my second attempt of the boss, I did anything dramatically different. All I did was make sure when I got there, I had full MP so I could cast heal more. Like that was my strategy. Don't die. You have a stop spell. It's literally called stop spell, which is supposed to stop your enemies from casting magic. That doesn't work on the final boss. And you have a sleep spell, which robs them of like 1d4 turns. That doesn't work on the final boss. So you're literally just slugging it out and then healing before they kill you and then slugging it out again. Like I crunched this math live on stream because I was like, okay, as long as I can hit him at least twice before I have to heal, I bet I'll be able to deal enough damage before he wears me down. And it turns out I was right. And that's just
nice.
It's just not fun. Like I think it's super interesting that they thought, we don't want to make the character or the player grind, so we will not make you lose all your experience when you die. But then even that, they managed to kind of make it unfun because when you die, the king harangues you for it.
Oh, he does, yeah.
So it makes death feel like an emotional and moral failing, even though mechanically it's kind of the right thing to do. Fight until you drop and then just stock up on potions and get back out there. Like mechanically, you are absolutely incentivized to just let death happen, but narratively, they make fun of you for it.
And that's true. And I think that the thing that where they kind of miss on that one, right? And there's no way they would have known to do this, is that the king is legitimately disappointed in you,
Yeah, he's not mad. He's just disappointed.
No. Right. A game that uses this exact same mechanic, but it's amazing, is Borderlands, But that's
Yeah.
because the new U station is tongue in cheek, right? It's because it's one of my favorite ones is the do not think about the fact that every time you've used a new U that you died the first time and that the first version of you was the real version of you. Do not think about this, It's like, oh yeah, technically every time I teleport I die, so it's funny and it's on theme with the thing, but the king just being like, oh man, dude, you died, bro. So I'm so sad at you, and you're like, all right, no, I get it. Like you keep casting your resurrection magic. I'm gonna go tirelessly kill this thing for eternity because I'm kind of his slave at that point because he won't let me die.
Yeah, that's true. Like
Yeah.
maybe the reason you just wander out into the wilderness to fight dragons because you're like, I'll succeed or I'll die and I'll be famous for having attempted it. But then when you fail, the king's like, you can be famous for succeeding or you can be famous for succeeding.
He's the Dennis Nedry of the Grim Reaper. But with death. So technically, to your point, right? Then you have there is zero cycle time, which is great, right? There's no cycle time because there both is because it takes you forever to get to something new, but technically you gain something, so it drops cycle time to zero. Here's something that I think is interesting that I just kind of want to discuss as a general game thing, but it does apply here, which is that there's a real, because I was basically, again, like you were saying, okay, if I can get in 2 hits before I have to heal, then I can beat the thing. That was the math you were chugging. I was chugging the radius math of how long can I explore before I drop. And you'd think that would increase linearly with your level, right? So as you gain levels, but it doesn't. It spikes. And I think that, and this is something that all RPGs kind of deal with, which is that if you have your character improve linearly, will actually cause really weird difficulty drops and spikes in the game because let's say that all the enemies in an area have like 5 hit points, right? And let's say every time I gain a level, right, I do an additional damage, right? So I'm dealing 3 damage, right? And every enemy takes 2 hits. I gain another level. I now deal 4 damage. Every enemy takes 2 hits. I gain one more level. I now deal 5 damage. Every enemy takes 1 hit. And that makes a huge difference, right?
Because if you go first, they now deal 0 damage.
0 damage, which means that now these enemies went from being meaningful in some degree to completely meaningless, And so I thought that was kind of interesting where basically I would be dealing with like a Drakey or something like that. And I was like, man, these guys suck. They deal like 6 damage and I've only got like 30 hit points. So I can realistically only fight about 5 of these because I go, then they go, then I go, and then they're dead. And then all of a sudden they became nothing enemies the minute that I got a sword that didn't really make me deal that much more damage. I think actually it was a level where it's like, oh, now I'm dealing 3 more damage, but it was enough to eclipse it to the point where I now dealt them all of their hit points. So it's something that all RPGs kind of deal with and developers need to be cognizant of, but it was particularly evident in this game when, like you said, if you go first, now all of a sudden it's like, this enemy is now meaningless to me.
Well, and this is the reason that no other RPG, I'm sure there are others, I'm just saying no other like classic JRPG that I know of is straight up 1v1 slugfests, right?
Yep.
Because if it was you against multiple enemies, then it's like, okay, I have to put this one to sleep and then I can, murder this one because that one has less hit points, or I have a spell that does more damage against it or something. Like if there was some kind of like opportunity to be a tactician or a strategist, but it's not ever. It's just a straight slugfest from the second you walk out of the castle to the last time you walk out of the castle. Like it's just, I will beat you to death before you beat me to death, like all the way up to and including the final boss.
Yep, I think it was all it's all that portion of the fight of Piccolo versus Android 17 where they're just literally punching each other in the gut as hard as they can. It's just that. Yeah,
so I do want to give credit / faint praise. There is I think the last town you go to, there's a golem outside, like just kind of guarding the town, I guess. And you can slugfest him to death, but there is one item that, as far as I can tell, you use it in this one and only one occurrence, which puts him to sleep. and then you beat on him until he wakes up, because the amount of rounds they wake up in is random. So you beat on him until he wakes up. Then you use the flute again and he goes back to sleep. So you walk up to this town, lull him into unconsciousness, and then repeatedly stab him. And then if he wakes up, you lull him back into unconsciousness. And like, is that incredibly deep tactical strategic gameplay? Not really, but
comparatively,
compared to just a straight slugfest, it's like, because you could very easily go there and not get this one optional item, right? Like let's say the game has 100 different inventory things, like things that could be in your inventory. To play the game at all, you will probably find 97 of them, right? So like there's the armor that you might not find because it's kind of hidden. The pixie flute is the name of the thing that puts him to sleep. And the sword, Lodo's sword, that you might not find if you don't explore the last dungeon. But basically everything else you will come into contact with. So it's like, okay, like you almost thought about like, how do we make 1v1 combat kind of interesting? And then like you sort of gave up on it.
The one final minor note that I have for mechanics is you can heal outside of combat, and I like that. Not every RPG did this back in the day. There were many games where you could only cast spells like in combat, and that was always just so frustrating, because it's like, oh, so you're telling me I have to wait until I'm actively defending for my life to cast this healing spell? Like Fireball I get, well, I mean, kind of not, because if anybody's played D&D, you know that Fireball is the answer to every possible scenario.
Got all kinds of tactical usage.
It's a great gif I saw recently where it's do you remember the episode of The Simpsons when Bart shakes up the beer for Homer?
Yeah, but he does it like in a paint shaker.
Yeah, and so like the house like explodes, right? It just shows Bart and he says, I didn't ask how big the room was. I said I cast Fireball. And it just
which is that's a good meme.
Yeah, right? Yeah, but I say all that to say I appreciate it when games allow me to cast spells that have meaningful out of, even like restore, anything that has like some type of healing property that allows me to do it outside of combat, which was not always the case back in the day, but they did it in this one, which is good.
Well, and the magic armor, which is the last armor you can buy, and then Lodo's armor, when you're walking around on the map, you just heal.
That's sweet.
Yeah. And then Lodo's armor even goes
way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. It basically, by the time you get Lodo's armor, you're pretty damn close to the end of the game, unless you did stuff like in a very bizarre order. So at that point, it's like you heal when you're walking around. So you could cast repel or use the repel item, and be totally absolved of combat. And then Lodo's armor goes above and beyond the magic armor and also makes the poison ground not hurt you, which is narratively appropriate because to get up to the final dungeon, you have to cross a huge expanse of poison ground. So it's supposed to be like, okay, I'm finally steeled against, the big bad. I'm as prepared as I can be. Here I go. It's just like so many things where they like dip their toe into a good idea, but because they didn't know any better, they didn't fully commit to it. And it's like, some of these turned out to be great ideas, and I really wish you'd done more. Some of these turned out to be terrible ideas, and I'm glad no other game ever did this again.
That is true. That is also all that I have. You got anything else?
I just want to quickly mention the inventory is designed by a madman, because you only have 10 spots where you can carry stuff, which is like, okay, fine. But then you got to carry like a bunch of crap in the first half of the game, and certain items stack and others don't. Like healing items stack, but repels and torches don't. So like, why? Like if you wanted to make this so that I couldn't stock up on these, then change the way this thing is interacted with. Like don't, because I bought like 5 or 6 repels and I was like, oh, cool. Like now I have some, because I didn't have the spell yet. And then she was like, oh, I can't sell you anymore. You can't carry anymore. And I was like, wait, what? And I opened my inventory and it's just like repel, 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 repel. And I was like, come on. Right. And like, you have to get keys, which are like a friggin' chore, but you can only carry 5 for some, or 6. Like they just won't sell you anymore. And certain places, like you need the keys to get through there, like final dungeon. Like just, I get it. Like, but this to me feels like it's probably half mechanics and half hardware limitations. Is on the original NES, they were like, we can't keep 150 items in memory. And the truth was they could, they just didn't know how, right? Like later games had no problem with that kind of thing. So I think it's like half bad programming and half mechanically. They don't want you to carry around 500 repels because then you'll get under leveled because monsters won't be attacking you. So it's just like inventories, man. Inventories. You would think somebody would have figured this out and then every RPG would have just copied it forever. But no, like we keep finding new ways to do weird things with inventories.
Well, and I did see a meme recently where it just showed, Link in the most recent Breath of the Wild. It says, "I am so sick of video games giving people unrealistic expectations of how many swords someone can carry in their inventory." Because it's just like sword, and it's like, all right, but again, to your point, right, is that we in a high fantasy game, it's got fantasy on the 10, right? Like, I'm not playing this for gritty realism. I'm not playing this so that way I have like having a total max carrying weight for inventory. Like, you can mechanically play with that. Okay, I can get that. But to say, well, you're carrying 2 swords, you can't carry anything else on you. It's like, stop it. This is not why I'm here.
Yeah, not even, it's not even on the list of reasons I'm here. It's not a low reason. It's not on, It did not make the cut.
Yeah, no, like literally, I remember how crushingly disappointed I was when I found out that unless the sword is under the length of between your wrist and like midway down your arm, you can't wear that crap on your back and draw it ever, because your arm's not long enough. Yeah. And I remember finding that out when I went as Trunks one year for Halloween, and I was like, this is going to be the most awesome thing ever. And I got the sword, and I was like, oh no. And so occasionally I'd draw the sword, and then like a very not Super Saiyan, and like a Kira Toriyama, see, it's still, I'm still talking about the thing. I'd have to go to one of my friends and very nicely ask them to put my sword away for me on my back. I say all that to say that wasn't a fun fantasy. That's not why I was a Super Saiyan, and that's not why I play fantasy games, to meticulously comb over my inventory. That's why I play The Sims.
Yeah, it's different. You go to a different store for different stuff. So are we ready to ask the final question?
Let us ask it. So, Lions, did it hold up?
No. So... So here's my closing for this, I think, is going to be as bizarre and complicated as trying to explain which version of this game we played, because here's how I actually feel. I actually had a decent time playing this once I completely gave myself over to the bizarre limitations of the era that this game was designed in, which normally would mean, well, full nostalgia goggles. I enjoyed it, but because I was trying to give it a pass. Here is the weird quirk of history that gets this game to skate in on a nostalgia monocle, which is, when you think about the way we described all of the mechanics of this game, the super close crop visuals, the fact that it was on the Game Boy, the sort of low fidelity sound, that sounds a lot like a mobile RPG, right? Really simple mechanically, press one button to kill them, try to kill them before they kill you, right? No tactics, no strategy, no thinking. And you know what? They ported this game to Android and to iOS, right? So if you're not walking around with a Game Boy Color all the time, you could actually play a version of this game that has way better graphics and way better music and is like, it looks nice, but it's got the same drop dead simple, this is meant to consume in little tiny snackable bites, right? Or like while you're waiting for the bus or whatever. Like this game, we have Pac-Man'd around in game design that people are now designing brand new RPGs for mobile phones that are exactly like Dragon Warrior was 30 friggin' years ago. So should you go play this game on the original Nintendo? Absolutely not. Should you play the Super Nintendo port? Maybe. It looks nice, but it's like a totally different game. The Game Boy port is close to the Nintendo port, which I would say probably hard pass on because it's just not very interesting. But should you play the souped up, beautiful looking mobile version on your phone while you're waiting for the next train to arrive? Yeah, probably. Like if you like mobile RPGs and you need it to be a dumbed down experience, here's a game that was a mobile game 30 years before mobile devices. So I'm going to slot it in as a nostalgia monocle, but either actually play it on a Game Boy and actually play it as a mobile game, or play the modern version, the souped up version on a mobile phone as a mobile game. If you're going back to the NES original, no, absolutely not. The Super Nintendo one, I can't weigh in on. But if you're going to play this, do not play it on a Super Game Boy in front of a television like we did. It's not that experience. It's a snackable mobile experience. So bizarre way to like slide into home on a nostalgia monocle, but that's where I landed.
Yeah, for me, it's full on nostalgia goggles.
Which of all the games we've reviewed, never have I been less prepared to argue with you. Like when I was writing my notes, I was like, he's going to say full nostalgia goggles, and how could I possibly disagree with him?
No, I mean, like to me, this is just literally an experience of make the numbers go higher. I can't think of anything else that's really a draw for this game. It's like, yeah, the visuals are nice and colorful, but okay, like that's like saying that the grammar is good in a book, outside of that, like the narrative is I mean, stock out of, like there's the big bad, go beat him up,
save the princess, slay the dragon.
Yeah, literally, So I mean, there's just not much to this game. Like the visuals are good, but they're nothing to write home about, So, I think that to your point, right, is if somebody had just a tremendous amount of free time, yeah, sure, go for it. But I think increasingly with the amount of entertainment that's trying to shoulder its way in and like compete for our attention, this one would require a tremendous amount of puffery in order to like make it into the top. So puff, puff.
The curtain falls. The music plays, the credits roll, then it all fades to black. And you're left by yourself. The fanfare is gone. There's no player two there by your side to share victories won. But as you slowly progress down the hall to your bed, a few great events leak back into your head from the time that you spent traversing the land, battling evil, fighting the darkness, just sword in hand. Your memories creeping with the edge of a smile. You realize again what you've lost for a while. You're gonna think back much less on how you saved the day than on all the experience gained.